Well, hello and welcome. My name is Sheila Wilson. I'm a registered nurse. I have a nonprofit, Stop Healthcare Violence, also a website and Facebook page called Stop Healthcare Violence. And with that, we have Heal the Healer. I have written a book titled The Shocking Reality of Violence in Healthcare and What We Can Do About It. I am also a host on Passionate World Talk Radio. Lillian Caldwell is the CEO, and the station manager is Jeannie White. Today, my guest is Elizabeth Dalton. She's a registered nurse that has worked in many years in the hospital setting. She will be speaking about the assault that changed her life. Welcome, Liz, and thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you, Sheila. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I just want to let you know how much I appreciate and many other nurses appreciate your advocacy for healthcare providers and nurses that have been assaulted in the workplace.
Thank you so much for saying that. That means a lot.
No, it's so true. And there's not a lot of assistance out there. That's one of the reasons why I decided to talk to you tonight. I can talk a little bit about what happened to me. I'm going to be very careful to not have any kind of HIPAA violation because I'm a very staunch believer in the privacy of our patients.
That's good.
In 2015, I was assaulted by a family member who was brandished a knife. This particular family member was mentally unstable. I didn't realize it when I first encountered this person, but I knew something was off. And there's a lot to the story, probably in regards to the mental health of this person, but I can't take that into consideration because I'm not a diagnostician, but I've worked many years in nursing, and I worked in the ICU. And I would say as a nursing diagnosis, this person had severe alteration in coping, which to me, mildly, if you think about a nursing diagnosis, this person could not cope with what was happening and decided to react in a very violent way with a weapon. And that was something that I had never experienced. I had experienced many patients, whether they were confused or they had mental health issues or addiction problems or withdrawing from alcohol, be violent, but I had never had someone specifically pull a weapon to frighten me beyond belief. And it was a what they call a Bowie knife, a hunting knife. And
wow.
The person came behind me, and while I was caring for the patient and was had my hands on the patient, caring for the patient, this person came up abruptly, very abruptly behind me with this large knife, pointing it to my hands, and I froze. I absolutely froze. Now, I was assigned to this particular patient, and the reason why they had picked me was because I've always been very good with distress in families, alteration in coping, maybe problems in the family, and maybe, I had a good way of de-escalating things. But in this encounter, there was no way I could de-escalate. I was cornered between the equipment, the patient, and this person behind me with the knife. And I had to, it even triggers me now, and this happened in 2015, but it still affects me to this day. But I had frozen, and all I remember is saying, please put the knife down. And I looked at his face was so close to my face. And I saw his eyes, and I'm telling you, they were black, void of any kind of emotion, pure evil, you know. I mean, I don't even know how to explain it.
Awful. I can't imagine.
Awful. It was awful. It was, you know, the rest of the story, you know, I really felt in that moment, I really felt, no matter what I did, that this man was going to stab me. I felt that in my just in my whole being, and I really couldn't move, you know. And I said, please put the knife down 3 separate times slowly. And there was another person in the room that was not a family member but a friend of the patient, and he yelled at this person, yelled to put the knife down. And the moment that he had backed away, I found a way to run out of the room. And, you know, I think you know too, Sheila, you know, we have so much resiliency. We deal with so many different things and emergencies and so forth. I came out of that room, and the only thing I could think about is that I didn't want to scare anybody. I didn't want anyone else to be frightened by what just happened to me. And I tried to call another nurse to me because when I got to the hallway, she told me that I was pure white. And I just said, you know, I said, this man just pulled a knife on me, you know. And long story short, the police were called. The 3 officers came. The security, probably 4 of them came. And I described, the man was still in the room. I described to them the knife. This man was taken out of the hospital, and I found out after the fact, they never searched him. They asked him to give the knife to them, and he gave a small, they said it was a 2-inch pocket knife.
Oh,
so
a little bit different than a Bowie knife.
Right, and because we had barricaded, you know, that's what the nurse administrator said, to barricade. We all went into different rooms. We had to put a chair against the door because when the 3 police officers came, we didn't know what was going to happen, so we had to protect the other patients in the unit. And
right.
After they took him out, you know, I can't believe he was never arrested. Excuse me. I'm just getting over a cold. Sorry.
All right.
He was not arrested.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of so many things that went down. But I have to say, for the purposes of our conversation, they did not arrest the man. I couldn't believe that, you know, they only trespassed him out from the hospital till the next morning and let him come right back in. So that's shocking. That's shocking in itself. And
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
While you were being confronted by this, now this was back in 2015, so were there any panic alarms that you could have pushed, or did you? I know what an ICU room is. That's like no room at all if you have visitors.
Well, the only place where there's a panic button is at the nurse's station. We do have a code blue emergency button in the room on the wall, but I was on the opposite side of the bed from that. I couldn't get to that button, you know.
Yeah.
And as far as screaming, I couldn't. I thought that knife was going to go right into me because he was so close to me.
That's all you'd have to do is sneeze.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, I wished I had a personal panic button or something like that.
Right.
That probably can discuss that further onto the podcast. But overall, my administration, who I had always respected, looked to for advice, completely did not support me. And
Wow.
after that happened that night, I was so shooken up, and the nurse in charge had called my nursing director. In the old days we used to call them a nurse manager, but they're called directors. And she spoke to me, and I don't have a memory of what we talked about, but I did talk to her. And after that day, when I found out that they let him back in, I was incredulous. I couldn't believe that there was no investigation or anything. And
that is really strange.
Yeah, and an incident report was filed and so forth, but when you file an incident report, it goes into a computer. You don't have an opportunity to copy it. You don't have an opportunity to see where it went, who it went to. It's it's always been on the computer. When something happens, you do that. And I don't know. They said that they didn't know about it. There was a lot of, just to be quite blunt, there were a lot of lies afterwards. They wanted this covered up. They did not want the public to know that this happened in their hospital. That's my opinion.
To the healthcare worker. That could have happened to a patient.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as far as our training on that kind of thing, we didn't have training on anybody with a weapon ever, or there's a very minimal policies at that time. I don't know what they have now about what to do in an emergency like that, but I do know that many nurses were told. I know one nurse that had gotten assaulted in the hospital, and she actually called the police. And she was reprimanded for doing that, calling the police.
She was reprimanded. Unbelievable.
Yeah, they said she didn't follow policy. But, as far as the night that it happened to me, they had a reduction in force for security. That I knew about because even after they had escorted this person off the property to trespass, they said they didn't have enough staff security to stay up on the unit, which, the nurse administrator said, no, you have to find somebody, because this was a thing that happened in the family. The rest of the family were all going to come in after that, and it was just, the person that was still in the room, this man was calling him. You could hear him screaming at him, but long story short is that I could not go back to work. And I have been diagnosed with PTSD and also depression. I could not tolerate that, things happened after that with my administration. I'd always been very proactive, joining practice council and training young nurses. I had a good reputation, and they tried to pretend that it never happened or that I had some kind of problem, because their report was that this was only a little pocket knife. So when I went to the police station to make an addendum on the police report that no, it was not a little tiny knife, okay, I went to the police station. I was with my brother-in-law, and I was with our union representative. And it turned out there was no police report written at all. Nothing.
It's like a big cover-up.
Absolutely.
But that really isn't unusual.
Yeah, and then I was also threatened that, that I could not talk to anybody. They didn't want the other nurses talking to me. That, to me, was like a blackballing for me. The other nurses felt bad about that. I had a lot of support from my colleagues, but I had negative 100 support from the administration of nurses that were in administration that were I had actually worked with in my past on the floor as a nurse, and even having them lie. Really, I can say that that right there, the betrayal that I experienced was, to me, one of the reasons I think why I started becoming very depressed, because the PTSD was something new to me. I didn't know what was happening to me. I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate. I was so scared. I had panic attacks. If someone spoke loudly, I would just jump. I mean, I still have that panic thing. If anyone comes up behind me, that's the worst thing that can happen to me. And I think it's like a reliving of the situation that happened to me, because I never in 100 years would ever expect that someone would pull a weapon on me in my job in the ICU. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Now, can I ask another question?
Sure.
This guy was a relative of the patient. Is that correct, in the ICU?
Yes.
And so he was in there, and you walked in as a nurse taking care of the patient, and he come up behind you, and he showed you the knife. Is that right?
I wouldn't even say that he showed it to me. He pulled it out and just like swiftly right in front of me. He was behind me to where my hands were on the patient. I was adjusting the oxygen, and I didn't know. I could have never thought what was the motive, what was the problem. I knew that after the fact, I knew that this person was very against medical care, against, I would say he was just against society, I don't know, a mentally ill, psychotic person.
So he has this knife. You saw it, but after security came and asked him to show him his knife, and he shows a little knife,
right,
like a jackknife or something. They never patted him down. They didn't. Well, they didn't really check.
Well, when I had to stay barricaded in a different room, so I didn't. None of us saw what happened with the police and the security in the room. We heard a couple of yells, and then I didn't hear. I didn't witness it myself. I could hear it, but when security came back to the floor, the police did not come back up to the floor. They never got a report from me, but security wanted a report from me. I had given them a report before they went in the room and after they went in the room. And when I said, they didn't tell me. They said, we got the knife. So I didn't know. It wasn't reported till later that it was this tiny knife. Okay.
Right, but the police never talked to you?
They didn't come back to the floor. And, it was just everything had happened so quick, and I was so scared. And, I remember saying to two security guards that had been outside with the police, and I said, did you search him? And at the same time, one said yes and the other one said no. It was so bizarre. I'm like, and I looked, and the two of them looked at each other, and then the one that was more in charge said, yes, we did. It was like, you know what? To me, that knife had to go somewhere, okay? I do remember one of the other nurses that had been in the room earlier. Her and I both had seen a bulge in the front of his sweater. And we don't know. We speculated that maybe he had a sheath, to put that big knife in, or in a shoe, or whatever the case may be, or it was in that room. But you know what? No matter what, that's what I saw. It was. I sent right after that. I was looking to show my nurse director a picture, a facsimile of what the knife size was. It was, it was a double-bladed kind of knife. It was just all I could think of in my head was that's a hunting knife. It was huge. Like
right,
who?
Right.
And I guess after there was some testimony later, because I had to go back to the police when they found out that there was no report. So two detectives had me come back to the police station and to interview me. And they said, well, we could send this to a magistrate. And I was like, okay. I said, is this man gonna have my address and stuff? And they said, oh yeah. And it was very, I don't know. I felt it put more fear in me. I didn't feel protected at all,
Right.
So, the only help I got was with my union. They represented me, they helped me, they advised me what to do. But ultimately, I met many other nurses after this through the union, nurses that had been assaulted in many different ways, whether it was attacked physically, in tables or chairs thrown at them, gurneys thrown at them, and they all had the same kind of story about the non-existent support from the administrators of the hospital. And there had been a story in the Boston Globe about, violence in the workplace. And a person who I never met, a doctor, I think he was a CEO or the COO or whatever like that, never met me, and he actually quoted the story about that, there were questions about my story because it was supposedly a very small knife. Well, I know what really happened. I know what the truth is. I know what I saw. I did not see a tiny little knife, because if I had, I would have said, put that down. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have,
right.
frozen to the ground. And I thought to myself, that is really despicable. Here's a person that is representative of the hospital telling a story that he never had, told from me, and I never met him before. So they were trying to protect themselves. I don't know.
I just find the fact that they weren't more involved. I mean, I can't believe that the police came in there to investigate and never found the knife if they patted them down. And never, right. And then again, you're the head of whoever was on that night. What shift did you work when this happened?
I was taking over the care of the patient at 11 o'clock. I had been there since 7, but I was studying the new computer program from 7 to, before 11. We give report before 11 and take over at 11. but the nurse
And you're
that
talking
had
PM.
Yes, yeah. I'm a night shift nurse.
Okay.
So
So that nurse knew that the patient's visitor.
oh yeah. Actually, right before I went in there, I mean, I did go in there to help her before she needed a help with lifting the patient up. And I heard this person that did this to me, he was swearing, he was F-bombing her, and I when she came out of the room, I said, oh my God, what's going on in there? Like, what's the problem? She was like, oh, I don't know. They would just, they would give him bad news or something like that. I said, oh, I don't understand why is he yelling at you? So there was just that very brief encounter, and then I had to take report and take over. So, my whole objective was to de-escalate whatever was going on, trying to find out what was going on. But I didn't find out till much later. This same person had assaulted a doctor on a different floor before this patient came to our floor. So that was never told to me in report, so there was a lot
Wow.
of behind the scene things, Sheila, that, I'd have to say at this point in my life, I'm finished ever going back in that situation, because I cannot confidently care for a patient anymore. I just can't do it. I can't be left alone. The PTSD, I've gotten all types of treatment, and I just don't think I'll ever get over it, ever, never.
Well, I've talked to quite a few nurses that have been assaulted, and they say the same. It's almost like listening to somebody else tell me the same story, that when the police were called, the police never really did what we thought that they should be doing. They should have patted the guy down. They should have made out a report for you. They should have supported you in such a way. Then you have your administration that doesn't support, and that's been going on for such a long time. And that's, it's like an open field. Just if you want to, hit a nurse, go ahead. Nothing will happen to you. They have signs all over the place now. But even when you call and report something, nothing much goes on. And the nurse is left with PTSD, and nobody cares.
No.
And that is, I just don't understand why that we're not doing more for the nurses. And not just the nurses. It's every healthcare worker. From I had a patient came in that was a tech. She did ultrasound, and she was scratched all the way from her chin all the way down to her chest by a patient. No report was made out. She came to get evaluated, but that was it. But so you've been out of nursing for a long time. This guy took this whole thing away from you?
Yeah, I had every intention. I had worked 20 plus years in the ICU, and nursing, being a nurse was my identity no matter what. Being a nurse is still my identity. But it's I don't know, I don't want to get upset.
But this man took that away from you and got away with it, with nothing between the police and administration. So I really think that, we need to work harder on this. And so many nurses.
So many nurses. And I will say that, I have to try to make a joke here, okay, because I'm going to just bawl. But it reminds me of the royal family. Never complain, never explain. Nurses are too afraid to appear that they can't do something, okay, or think that somebody thinks that they're incompetent or they're not doing the right thing. But that's just a projection. That's a projection because we all want to be perfect at everything that we do. We want to give the best care. We want to advocate for our patients. But no one will advocate for us.
Right. And that's, I worked in CCU, coronary care unit, and I know what it's like that when you have a patient that is ill, the same as your patient, not his family, but you don't take your eyes off of them. And you make sure that you're in the room, you're around, you talk to them. It's a huge responsibility to take control of that patient and make
Absolutely.
sure he gets the best care again. And with
Absolutely.
the doctors, did the doctors give you any support at all?
Well, I would never say that they didn't because I had great rapport with the doctors. I always loved the doctors that were in training. I tried to help them too, the interns and then the residents and then the fellows. I saw many through their careers, and their hands are tied too, Sheila. Their hands are tied. They have to follow such strict policies, and I can appreciate that, but most of the time they don't want to do the wrong thing either. But this particular situation was too much for a doctor. Oh, you know what just happened here? We just lost our power.
Oh my goodness. Well,
all right, I'm talking to you in the dark.
Well, okay, now I'm just going to say.
We're having Nor'easter tonight,
Okay, why don't we stop and you'll come back on the show and you'll be doing why so many nurses are leaving nursing?
Yeah, and I would really like to talk about moral injury.
Yes, please.
Moral injury is a new coined term in health. Don't mind all the noise. The dogs are barking now because they can't see. But moral injury in healthcare is a new topic that came out probably about in 2018 for healthcare providers. And it's not just about burnout. Burnout is just a part of it, but it's a moral injury in distress,
right.
Probably caused by a lot of betrayal from hospital policies that go against everything that we try to do for our patients, finding the right care for our patients and the right necessary things that they need and not kowtowing to the administration and the insurance companies. So it's a big subject.
Okay. Well, Liz, I'm going to say thank you so much for coming on to the show. I know I said it earlier, but this is great information for people to know because I know you're not the only one out there that has been kind of scratching their head going, what did I do? They don't believe me? And even years later, physically you could be healed, but mentally you're not. So,
right.
Thank you again for coming on to the show.
Thank you. I just want to say one more thing. There was there was a saying at the time. It was, if the nurse isn't safe, how could the patient be safe?
You're right.
Because we're the ones that protect our patients.
That's right, and we really protect them.
Oh, yeah, totally. I miss it so much. But anyway, Sheila, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for listening to me. I'm sorry if I got emotional, but it's just a lot. So
it is a lot.
One day at a time.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Good night, and I'll be talking to you shortly.
Good night, Sheila.